Hey kids, this is Ivan. This is the 5th installment in the Weapons series. And after this one, then I'm going to start to talk about like meshing all this stuff together and comparing stuff. Now, if you're a really old school gamer, you might want to turn this one off right away, but don't do it, because I'm going to talk about some stuff they do in Pathfinder and D20. And I think it's really instructive just to see how other games handle stuff, and also just see how the evolution of the game has gone. And there's some neat ideas that you can maybe mine for your game, and that's what I'm all about, is stealing ideas. I'm also going to talk really briefly about something I missed when talking about 2nd edition, and that's the idea of weapons groups. You know, in 1st edition was always kind of a bummer that like you got a proficiency with a longsword, say, and if you picked up a broadsword, you took your full penalty to hit with it. You know, even though it was like kind of like a longsword, it was a bummer. So what they did in 2nd edition was they came up with the idea of weapons groups. They implemented this in 3 ways. First off, if you became proficient with a weapon, there was a small group of weapons around it that were kind of similar that you were sort of half proficient in. So you only took 1/2 of your normal attack bonus penalty when using those weapons. Rounded up, of course, but it helped. The other thing they did, and I think it was just for fighters, was they allowed you to spend 2 weapons proficiency slots to become proficient in a small group of weapons known as a tight group. They're all very similar. And if you wanted to spend 3 proficiency slots, you actually could become proficient in this larger group of weapons known as a broad group. So it was kind of interesting and made a bit of sense, you know, maybe not to the hardcore weapons enthusiasts who know how all this stuff works, but, you know, to us gamers it made a little bit more sense and was a little less nasty. And anyhow, what do they do in Pathfinder? First off, not surprisingly, every single class has a list of weapons that they're proficient in. It's a little bit more like basic than it is like 1st or 2nd edition. You're actually proficient in these weapons and you know how to use them, and you don't get any penalties for using them. However, you have the option of learning other weapons. If you're like a wizard, you're not restricted to those weapons. You could essentially spend a feat, so to speak, to learn another weapon. It'd be silly because you really want to use your feats for other stuff as a wizard, but you could potentially do it. Now, weapons were divided into 3 different categories. They were divided into simple weapons, martial weapons, and exotic weapons. Now, simple weapons were just that. They're simple. They're the weapons that you or I could pick up and learn how to use without a heck of a lot of training. And these were things like the dagger, the light mace, the sickle, the club, the heavy mace, the morning star, the short spear, the long spear, the quarterstaff, the spear, the blowgun, the heavy crossbow, light crossbow, javelin, dart, and sling. So these were, simple weapons, and most classes could use all of them. I think the magic user, or the wizard, so to speak, only used a small percentage of them in terms of being proficient right away with them. The martial weapons were pretty much contained almost all the weapons that you're used to in D&D. The basic, swords and polearms and flails and all that kind of stuff. And then the exotic weapons were essentially exotic. These were things like either like all the stuff that you would think a monk of using in terms of like if you turned on Kung Fu Theater or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or whatever, they'd be using the sais and all that kind of stuff. So these were things that like fighters weren't proficient in those. They were only proficient up to martial, but they were these some exotic weapons. There were a lot of racial weapons, including like old standards like the halfling sling staff. You'd have to be a halfling to be proficient in that right off the bat. There were some oddballs in exotic weapons that you would normally think of being normal weapons in D&D, and these were things like the bastard sword of all things, the whip, the net, the hand crossbow, and the repeating crossbows. Things that you would think, geez, how come these are an exotic? But they were. Weapons are also formally divided into light weapons, one-handed, two-handed, and ranged weapons. Fortunately, they took polearms, that giant list of polearms from 1st edition, and they scrunched it into a few different things. So they had picks, like light and heavy picks, the glaive, which is like a blade on the end of a pole, the guisarme, which is like a long shaft with a blade and a hook mounted on the tip, the halberd, which is kind of like this long pole with like an axe and a pointed tip, all in one, like just a big pole axe. And the ranseur, which is like a spear tip with 2 curved blades on either side. So those were kind of the pole arms you were limited to, but it made sense because if you look at all the pictures, these are the pole arms for the most part. Weapons are also divided, classically into piercing, slashing, and bludgeoning types. Now, a lot of weapons had special effects, associated with them, and some of these are, fairly standard, but some could be set against a charge, the really long ones. Some were long enough to be reach weapons, so you could attack people from far away, including holding them at bay, which is kind of neat. Some are really good at tripping, some are really good at disarming. Some of these effects were just effects that only those weapons could do, and some of those just gave you a bonus when you were trying to do that. that weapon helped out. Like, a flail helps disarm because it's got that big chain on it. You kind of wrap the other guy's sword in it, that sort of thing. All weapons also had a critical hit range and amount. Now, I talked about critical hits before, but the idea is like normally you roll a 20, you have to confirm the armor class again, and if you do that, you do like double damage. Some weapons actually did more than double damage on a critical hit, and some weapons actually had an increased range. Like some, would threat to a critical from an 18 to a 20 because they were just more dangerous. Things like a scimitar or whatnot, where they cut you open pretty easily, that sort of thing. Using a weapon two-handed would give you a 1.5 times your strength bonus in terms of damage, which is kind of interesting because normally in first edition, if we did that at all, we might give you like +1 to your damage overall. Now, what happens if you use a weapon that you're not proficient with? Well, first off, it gives you a -4 to your attack roll for every class. Doesn't matter if you're a fighter or a wizard, it's -4. It's pretty bad. Improvised weapons are all -4. And if you're throwing them, they have like 10-foot ranges for like short, medium, long. Two-weapon fighting was a lot worse than the -2, -4 you had in something like AD&D. Normally it's -6, -10 when you're using two-weapon fighting. Now, if the offhand weapon was light, then it was -4, -8. Still pretty bad. If you had the two-weapon feat, then it was -4, -4. And if you had the feat and the offhand weapon was light, it was -2, -2. So it was pretty hard to use two-weapon fighting. Now, also, weapons had size categories, and this was for things like halflings. That way, their weapons actually did less damage than normal weapons because they were teeny. And this was kind of interesting if you wanted to play a halfling. It wasn't so great. There were also some large weapons that did more damage than the normal size ones, and if you tried to use a weapon that was too large or too small, you'd actually take to hit penalties. They also had the idea of masterwork weapons. So you could buy and find these really fine exotic weapons that gave you a +1 to your attack roll, not a +1 to damage, and it wasn't magical in any way. It was just really well made. Now, any increase, like how do you do weapons proficiencies? How do you do masters, masters, and then specialization, all that kind of stuff? Well, any increase in weapon skill outside of attack bonus and extra attacks tended to come from feats, with some exceptions for the fighter class. All classes got 1 feat at first level, and then they got them at all odd levels. And because Pathfinder was based on like a 20 level progression, that means you got 10 feats for the most part. Fighters actually got a bonus feat at first level, and then on the even levels, they got it again on the second level, and then the even levels they got more feats. So a fighter would actually get 21 feats in his career, whereas a normal character would get 10. The other thing that happened was that those extra fighter feats were all supposed to be used for the combat feats. That's what you were supposed to use them for. Now the ranger actually got like half as good. He got like 5 extra combat feats, as opposed to the fighter. And if you were human, of course, they'd throw you a bone, give you 1 extra feat in the beginning. But fighters for the most part got twice as many feats as everybody else, and all those other feats were supposed to be combat feats. If you were another class, you were pretty silly to use your feats for combat stuff, because the whole idea in that game is to get some of the really nifty powers and stuff, you had to spend feats. Now, I'm not really into feats, but this is how you did it. Now, the other thing that happened for fighters, outside of his whole feats thing, was he had something called weapons training, which is kind of like weapons groups. At 5th level and every 4 levels thereafter, so this would happen for him 5 times in his 20-level career, he would choose a weapon group, and he got +1 to hit and damage for all weapons in that group. And then, 4 levels later, he got to choose a different group. And the group that he initially got all that training in went up another one. So like if you chose like swords, and then the next time you chose like maces or something like that, now all of a sudden, with all swords, you're +2 to hit and damage with all those, and with maces, you're +1 to hit with all those. You choose now spears or polearms the next time, then you're +3 to hit with all swords and damage, and then +2 with all the maces, now you're +1 with all the polearms, etc. They also had something called weapon mastery, which only happened at 20th level, and the fighter got to choose 1 weapon, with which he confirmed all of his critical hit rolls. He increased the multiplier of those by 1, and he couldn't be disarmed. That's what being a weapons master was. Well, not too great, but that's what they gave you, because there were all these other feats you could take to do all the really nifty stuff. Now, there are feats available in Pathfinder to allow you to get, say, proficiency with all simple weapons, because, like, say, if you're a wizard, you really don't have proficiency with all simple weapons. Or you could use a feat to become proficient with one martial weapon, so it's just kind of like, doing proficiency in old school D&D, or with one exotic weapon. So if you're a fighter and you want to learn to use one of those nifty martial arts things, or even a bastard sword, you'd have to spend a feat to learn how to use it. Now, in terms of the kind of weapon specialization we're used to in older school D&D, you had to take these as two different feats. First, you had to take something called weapons focus, and that gave you a +1 to hit with one weapon. And then when you became a 4th level fighter, you were allowed to take what was called weapon specialization, and that gave you +2 damage to hit with that same weapon. You had to already be focused in it. As an 8th level fighter, you could take greater weapon focus, and once again, with that same weapon, get another +1 to hit. And at 12th level fighter, you could take greater weapon specialization with that same weapon and get another +2 to damage. So after taking those 4 feats over the course of 12 levels, you gave yourself +2 to hit and +4 damage with that weapon. But the cool thing outside of that was it was probably one of your groups already, so you got these crazy bonuses with this one weapon for the most part. All the other combat maneuvers we're used to, a lot of the stuff we're talking about in like weapon mastery and stuff in the rules encyclopedia, and what have you, these are all feats, and you need to take these and choose carefully what they are. I'm not a big feats fan, but that's kind of like how they like to differentiate and customize the character classes. And I'll talk about those things later on, but I think most of those should be in an old school game more be like things that just happen for the class. But they had some interesting stuff. But I enjoyed some of the stuff they did in terms of weapons groups for fighters, just having that stuff sort of happen. And for paladins and rangers, they really had other powers, so that didn't happen for them. The fighter, his whole shtick was being really good with weapons. Also, fighters get extra attacks per round at 6th, 11th, and 16th level. Now, thieves and clerics also got extra attacks per round, and that was at 8th and 15th level. And magic users even got extra attacks per round at 12th level. And how that worked was, you got your attack bonus, your THAC0, kept on getting better, and once it was better by 6, then you got a second attack. However, that attack was 5 places behind the other one. So say you had a +6 attack bonus, now you got your second attack, but that one was only a +1. By the time you got 3 attacks, you were, say, +11 with your first attack, then you get +6 with your second attack, and then +1 with your next attack. So you got these extra attacks per round, but you were crappier at hitting. Interesting idea, and especially considering the rounds in something like Pathfinder or Basic are short, and it's not the same thing as like First Edition where it's this big long round. So that's pretty much what they did with weapons in Pathfinder. There's tons and tons of feats, and like I say, that's not a thing I'm interested in. But that's how they handled the basic weapons progression, and of course most of it favored the fighter. Next time, we're going to start talking about like some of my preferences, looking at some of these various penalties and whatnot, and trying to make sense of, what are some of the cool things to do with weapons, and, how do you choose like what kind of systems you want to use if you want to tweak your old school game.